in the chat, please. So, like I said, feel free to unmute, ask a question anytime. We're happy to have you be engaging. And you can also write a question or make a comment in the chat too. So I'll be very eager to get your feedback and what you think of processes and if this is helpful and any questions you have along the way as well. So we're just trying to make sure you walk through so you know you have a grant. Woohoo! Now what is next? And Marlon's clicking through for me.
All right.
So we need to celebrate. So yay, everybody. Hooray. So happy that you got the grant and that you're moving forward. Hi, Karen Kilgarian. You're a good one to celebrate with here. So,
Hey, Barbara.
Hi, really hoping you're celebrating with all of your colleagues as well as you begin to get the work done. Hi, Laura. Next slide. So we've done introductions on this side from who everybody is and what they're working on. Zachary, hello as well from Alaska. Yay, from Anchorage. Thank you. Happy to have you here. So we've got people's names, where they're from, what their position kind of is on the right so we know who we're talking to along the way. For those of you that got in a minute late, I'm Barbara Hopkins and Marlon Jeffers is on with me as well. Oops, I have my Zoom chat over the page number and I'll wind up taking Marlon's thunder if I do that. Please know that this is being recorded just for the benefit of other people who couldn't attend who will be coming on later. So at the end of this, hopefully you'll know, I mean, you've gotten information in writing already, but you'll know what's next. You'll know about the addendum and what tools you have to help you complete things. You'll know about the grant overall process and then progress report timelines. We'll give you an overview of the grant manager role. I think that's important. I think we used to call each other grant specialists. I don't know that that's the case overall, but we are the managers of your grant, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Talk about using ed communities, and then the role of promoting networking and learning from your grant. And you can ask questions anytime, but certainly we'll have a time at the end as well, but please ask along the way. So if you think back to the purpose of the GPS Fund grants, and I think it's important to go back through this just because it's a reminder as you now get the party started and get going on the work, that you remember that this is about demonstrating leadership. So getting people engaged in leadership roles in the work, really to support public education and students, of course. And a big part of what we're doing is trying to engage members. So it's not a person who's managing a grant with 83 people showing up to take workshops and that's the end. That's, I always say, a behind in a seat. That's not an engaged member, and that's not an outcome. So we need to think beyond that. And we talk about student-centered success through union-led efforts. It means you're leading the way, but it doesn't mean you don't have partners. So I think that's important too. But those are the overall purpose. If you think of our two goals, really it's about empowering educators for student success and building broader capacity of your affiliates. So if you're doing those two things, you're going to be right on track with the grant. Hi, Sue. If you go ahead and log in on the right, if you can, if you're not driving, and put your name and your position and your state, that'd be great. For the overall purpose of the GPS Fund grants, you're developing products or programs or strategies, perhaps, but that's really about the outcomes, not just the numbers like we just talked about. And the bigger purpose is that we're investing in your leadership at your location, but it's very, very, very important to us that you network and learn through ed communities and other things, then you share that. Otherwise, we've invested in one affiliate to get stronger. That doesn't make us stronger as a whole. So we really are trying to help people not reinvent the wheel. Perfect example, Penny was asking where else they're doing cultural competency, so they're not starting from ground zero. And Karen Kilgarian's an expert at all the communications things, that thinking about how we brand these materials and efforts and promotions with NEA and your affiliate as well, so people know how involved we are in improving the profession and in student success. That's really, really an important thing always, but we really ask you concentrate on that as well with the grants. And again, all of it, the outcomes, the sharing, the promoting is to meet NEA and affiliate goals.
Okay. Okay, you received your MOU and your award letter, and those were all awarded on February 1st, were announced. And the award letter has with a signature in a box at the end that you need to sign and return back to David Boyd or your grant specialist. The second thing is the addendum, and this needs to be completed. There are two parts to it, but the first one is due, and those are the goals approved by February 22nd. So you need to work with your grant specialist on approving those goals. And the other parts are the scope of work and the budget and those types of things come at a later date. And also there was a checklist, and then the checklist has some things for you to look at and decide as your team and how you want to move forward. The GPS fund terms. Sorry. We're having trouble with the clicker today. It just likes to keep moving without having the information there. Okay, so the GPS fund, the MOU, on there it has the terms and acceptance. And so check the amount and the years to make sure that is correct. If it isn't what you asked for, some aspects are not approved. There's guidelines. That addendum sort of spells out some of the things that you need to do before you can get started with the grant. If it's everything that you can do, make sure to sign and return that MOU and contact the grant manager if you have questions.
So one of the things with that, if I could chime in, Marlon, if it wasn't what you asked for, in other words, you didn't get the full amount you asked for, then it would have in the addendum that you need to adjust your budget and adjust the money that you asked for accordingly. At times, people have asked for something that doesn't meet the guidelines, so that has to be taken out. The grant award would have told you if you need to adjust your budget that amount or if you just need to adjust your activities within that amount. Hopefully that's clear.
And in that addendum, there's two sections. Section 1 is required before the funds begins or the award is official and before you can get that first check. And so we want you to make sure that everything is approved and turned in by February 22nd. They want to clarify that budget, the coordination, and the information in that addendum that was asked. And then section 2 is by the date identified. That has to do with the scope of work. And that's planned over time. When we look at that addendum, most of you have to do the following: measurable goals. And many times the goals were very vague. We just want to make sure you look at those goals and make sure that they have outcomes. And we have a few slides that we'll talk about what that scope of the work is. And that includes those goals and outcomes over time. And then the budget template, there's a template attached to it. Many of you turned in your budget, but there's a template that goes for that in your communication plan over time. And then if there are other questions, and then budget adjustments at the time. And usually the budget adjustments after time, if you want to change that budget, you work with your grant specialist, and they'll work with you for that approval process, and just sort of checking you over time when you do that.
And for the other
excuse me. Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt.
No.
But when I was writing the grant, there was a budget template that was included in Ed Communities that I used.
Cool.
Is that the same budget template that we are supposed to turn in if we're amending our budget?
Yes. And for some people, they had used that, but that's not the way the grant was written out. So to be honest, the forms don't upload into the JOT form, which makes it very difficult. It will in time, but they don't right now. So, but yeah, it's exactly the same. The communications plan is the same. The scope of work is the same. So if you have attachments with those, that's great. Just make sure in the budget template that you have the justification of the different expenses and stuff. With this page 11 where it says other questions, As your grants went through the processes, some of the people who were reviewing it may have had some other questions, like why would you think about this, or this isn't allowed, or what do you intend to do about this? So those, if you have questions like that on your addendum, they have to be answered before you get the money or before the grant's official. But your grant manager is the one who helps you figure that out and answer it if you need help other than you. Yeah. Good question, Lisa.
And so also that it was attached was a checklist, and that is really for you to guide yourself through some of the things that you can ask to contact and what you need to be doing over some time. And so I think that was changed from last year in the process, and it just sort of gives you some more information how to get going on your grant as quickly as possible. It also talks about your progress reports are going to be due over time. And there should be like 3 pages for that. Turn the goals over to Barbara.
So things to be aware of with the goals. Someone last week said, Barbara, I can't find the template for the goals. There isn't one. At the top of the scope of work, it asks for the revised goals. So just work with your grant manager far enough in advance so that you have good outcomes. We'll talk a little bit about that too here. So that you have good outcomes so that those then can help you build your scope of work. But there's not a form, it's just rewrite them for the scope of work. There's a number of people engaged is something that people are getting better about. If you put a 5% increase, we don't have baseline, for instance, so that doesn't help. But a number of people engaged is attendance, is what I try to say, or behind in a seat. That's not an outcome. What's the impact of their engagement? Probably the only time people engaged is an outcome is if you're working on a retention plan and your goal is the retention of educators through a mentoring induction or recruitment retention plan. The number of people that were retained, but it's not engaged, it's really that there's a retention and that they feel like that, but you should still ask some quantitative things like, do they feel the program was helpful? Do they feel like it supported it? Do they feel like their students were more successful because of the program? Those should be asked too, but otherwise it's not attendance. Just to help, just to be specific enough that hopefully it helps you think through those things. How they rate a training is good. Most of us ask those kind of things. But Marcia Tate, who's really a big researcher on brain and science and learning, says if you do a one and done, you might as well not bother. So how they report back on utilizing the skills you gave them of impacts or outcomes is even better. And take a step further, if you can see how it does with student success, that's even better.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late.
Hi, Betsy. Thank you.
Betsy. I certainly wasn't my intention to be late, Marvin. Marlon.
That's okay. That's okay, Betsy. We're going to introduce you here shortly.
It's good to see you all.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. Things to be aware of is when you did the research on your need, when you said this is the need we have, and if you did any research at all on it, it should say what those outcomes should have been. For instance, if you're a more effective teacher, which is like about it, if you're an NBCT, it's not about becoming an NBCT. That's like another certification or something you get extra pay for. The outcome should really be you're a more effective teacher and students learn better. So those would be the outcomes. So think about what the research said around your program to think about outcomes if that's something we've asked you to do, which honestly most people do. So I can tell we haven't done a good teaching lesson on that, with our apologies. So some big goals, for instance, are recruitment as a result of your work. Several of you have worked on recruitment of educators of color for the future. So certainly that's impactful. That'd be something too. That'd be numbers would be appropriate, but also if they felt the program was effective in helping them get the support they needed to be recruited and be in education. Retention as a result of your work. But a step further is things like less school discipline issues for students of color as a result of educators taking cultural competency courses. So even just thinking about less discipline interventions for those teachers taking that is certainly something to think about for next steps. Here's some examples that are roughly, not to toss dirt at anyone, but to say you'll have an evaluation based on and adjust based on outcomes is like saying we have a test tomorrow, kids, and I'll decide how to evaluate it later. So that doesn't work. Or we will have curriculum developed. That's not an outcome. That's a step to get in so you get to implement it. It's a step. It's a to-do list that's important, but it's not an outcome. 125 people will take classes or fill in the blank of what they'll do. That's not an outcome. That's attendance. Members will be engaged with the affiliate. How many and what way? How are you going to track it? How will you judge if it's good engagement? If everybody comes and crabs at a board meeting, that's engagement. It's not necessarily probably what your outcome was. If you say in 5 years we'll do X, Y, Z, but it's a 3-year grant, that's not helpful. Remember, there's accountability within each 6 months of the grant. So what benchmarks would you have that we could check every 6 months to say, yep, this is what they planned and this is what they're doing? Or this isn't what they got done, but here's why, and here's what we've learned, and here's the mistakes were made, or here's extraneous factors, all those other things, that's fine. And I used the example already of saying like 30 educators become MDCTs. That's not really your goal. Your goal is more effective teaching and better learning, so get to that point. But sometimes I think it helps to say what a goal isn't. Not trying to be disrespectful in any way, but take it deeper to say those next steps. With goals as an example, and this is rough, but it gives you the idea. If you're saying 30 early career educators, and we're defining that as 1 to 10 years a year, will be matched with 10 veteran member teachers to participate in a mentoring program. That's the what? Time period over 3 years. There's 10 a year, so they'll be 30, or 30 a year, so they'll be 90, in order to impact student success. So the best student success measure would be a student survey or perception, or check the kids for those teachers somehow, depending on what access you have to student data. Increase early career teacher retention. You should know if they stayed in education. I always try to word that one, if they stayed in education, because we understand a lot of young teachers, being a female profession, they may decide to stay home with children for a few years, so you don't want that to hurt. But if they stayed in the workforce, you could say, did they stay in education? And survey the impacts each year for early career educators and the mentor educators. You've got two sets of educators in that scenario, so that's important. Or like in Nebraska, where you're working with students and you have the more experienced educators who are tutoring them, you may want to see how they feel about being engaged in that. Does it help? And how do they feel about being engaged with the union too, as an example. If you're going to track if you increased NEA membership, Shafisa does a good job of this down in Broward County. The numbers of increase in membership make sense. You may want to also ask as an evaluative thing, do they feel more attached and prouder to be a union member, anything like that qualifies a little bit more. And develop teacher leadership. We're working, I hope you are too, to track involvement. If they go from a class to developing curriculum, to teaching the classes, to being on a professional development advisory board, any of those types of aspects where they go up the pathway, so to speak, of their development and professional practice, that'd be something that would be good data to have. And if you add, we're kind of working on this, but help us, a perception of both early career and mentor teachers. And also to tie into that, a goal might be to have better affinity or affiliate more with the union, is to also add a question about how they feel about NEA and your local or state being engaged in professional development. You know, do they feel more a part of, or like it's better value add, those kind of questions. We're kind of messing with the way we might ask that. If you have ideas, we'd love to hear about it. But those are some samples of the goals and ways to think about the outcomes, if you will. Questions about that?
When we look at the SMART goals, it's when we're looking at your goals and your outcomes, we're really taking you through the SMART goals process. And I know you can download these and many of you use them, but we're looking at certain questions that we're looking for those goals. And I'm just going to go through those rather quickly, but we just want you to know SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So when I look at specific, we're really looking at the 5 W's: who, what, where, why, when, and which. And so when you look at those goals and outcomes, we're looking to see if we can find those in there. And it's sort of a checklist for you when you're working on that addendum. And some people have been, you have that main goal. You can break down those into sub-goals also, or sub-outcomes. Next one is measurable. And that's what Barbara was talking about. How can you measure this? Besides, you know, she talked about numbers in the seats, but how can we measure that the information that you're receiving in the professional development is actually being implemented in the classroom? Is it making a difference for the profession, personally and professionally, as well as for student achievement? So that's the measurable. Is it achievable and attainable? Making sure that I would say your scope of work over time, can you get that done in that amount of time? Those kind of things. And these are just sort of questions you can ask yourself. Is this effort required? What is the motivation of the goal? Those kind of things. So it's just sort of questioning yourself. The next one, is it relevant, realistic? Can this work be done in that amount of time? Making sure that you are taking the information that you came up with a need. Is there a correlation there? And these are some of those questions you can ask yourself. The next one is time bound. Make sure it's specific so we know what you're doing 6 months out, a year. If you have a 3-year grant, you have that laid out for those 3 years. And so those are time specific goals and questions you can ask yourself. When we look at the forms, when we go to the website on the forms, we just want you to know that there are forms and lots of information on our site that has, for the grantees, it has forms that you can use, you can download and use those and submit. It also has examples, but on that left side of the page at the bottom is where you're going to be looking at the primary forms that you're using. And this is Barbara's.
Thanks. I was just typing. The site means it's mynea360.org is the website in Ed Communities. And the group is NEA Grants, the number 4, Great Public Schools. So I typed that in. So that kind of covers the goals, which is really, really imperative to all the rest. Are there any questions at all about digging deeper in the goals?
I like to get a copy of the goals in this PowerPoint or this presentation.
Yeah, and everybody will. It'll be up on Ed Communities.
Got it.
So we will put it there, you bet. Thank you. So with the scope of work, which is also, as you remember, on the left-hand side, Barbara Ransom, our colleague out in California, put it up for us. She helps a great deal. She's a teacher leader out there, member. And it's on the left-hand side of the NEA Grants for Great Public Schools side, as Marlon mentioned. With the scope of work then, if any of you looked at that before as a way to plan, again, it doesn't upload the job plan except by an attachment. But think about that as a key benchmarks that ties to the progress reports. If you're going to have to report to us every 6 months, if you get to report and share your successes and your challenges and all of the rest of that, a couple things there. You know, the progress report, think about those big things. What will you have done in 6 months? So this doesn't have to be your to-do list. Your scope of work doesn't have to be your to-do list where every single step, like hire, you know, identify the mentors, prepare the application process, all those other things. That's your to-do list. We figure you'll have some infrastructure and logistical things to do, but that doesn't mean it has to be on the progress reports or have to be listed on the scope of work. It can be if you want to be, but that's not what we need. Really what we need are the key things that are going to be based upon what you'd want to be accountable for 6 months. If you were doing an independent project in a college course and said in 6 months and 12 months, this is when I want to report to you on what's happening, think of the scope of work that way. Then at the end of the 6 and 12 months, hopefully, we're working on a little bit new system where you just talk about the 6-month scope of work report and say, this is what I got done on this. And then really just share what were the challenges, successes, pitfalls, things that got in the way, barriers, stuff like that, rather than a whole bunch of words on a progress report that don't necessarily tell us anything. So on this, numbers do matter, and as do the outcomes. So if you set a target of, I make up numbers all the time, 23, I don't know, 380, it doesn't matter. And that's what number you thought you'd have for something by that date. Again, I always tell people, don't be afraid to fail, be afraid of not trying. So do mention the numbers as well as whatever outcomes you have from that. But if you don't meet the target, that doesn't mean the money's going away. But also, if you're struggling with something, make sure to contact your grant manager ahead of the progress reports. No one should have a surprise on a report card if they're a student. We wish. And no one, we wish, would have a surprise when they read a progress report and not have any clue that a grant is struggling and not have heard from them. So it's that same basic communication. So again, think progress reports. What do you want to be accountable for every 6 months, 6 months, 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, 6 months, 12 months for a 3-year grant. Estimates work fine. Like I said, then you'll discuss what went well, what didn't, why, changes you want to make. And you get to make changes along the way. This is your plan. It doesn't mean that it's not in golden tablets. It's not written in stone. It's talk to your grant manager and let them know what you need to do or what adaptations need to make. We're going to be facing an interesting time with Janus potentially coming into play. The idea that you get distracted from this work to go do that does not, we get that there's other things that happen in life, things like hurricanes and tornadoes and things in life that are more personal. But so talk to people about it, but try to find ways to keep the work going as well. We do know some things are heading, so try to make some plans accordingly if you can. But let us know if there's a major issue. So with the budget template that you have, it does ask for explanations. Some people gave us very rough budgets with just total amounts. Others gave a lot of detail. But notice on the budget template, it asks to include rationale and how you figured it, so to speak. So if you say you got X amount of dollars for substitutes, you should give us the breakdown that it's 30 people times $120 a day times 10 days, and there's like 30 members of the group. And what they're doing is developing curriculum. We should be able to see what your plan is as much by looking at the budget as we do from looking at the scope of work. So if you say you've got X amount for personnel, we really ought to know what that's based on. It's not a number out of your hat to subsidize somebody's salary. This should not be supplanting paying instead of the organization paying. That's not what should happen. It should be designated for someone to do this work. If someone's already on staff, they shouldn't be getting the money from here because that's supplanting. You want work for committees or other people to do things, or they're doing additional above and beyond, then that's acceptable. Our fiscal year may not apply directly to your fiscal year, but you'll have to meet your grant year in your reporting, so our apologies to the CFO. For some of you, your fiscal agent may not be the affiliate. That's okay. Just make sure your grant manager and David Boyd know that. Some use another foundation. Some have a 501c3 for the education association that they use. Some even partner so well with the school district that they utilize them. That's all okay. Make sure that it's understood with that entity. I'd suggest an MOU myself, but they don't run the grant just because they're handling the money. We've had some problems with that, where they thought they got to say, and they got to say if we came in as a grant manager, and they were going to tell people when to show up and not show up for work. A fiscal agent does not mean they're in charge of the grant or the staff, or whoever's designated accordingly. That means they're counting the beans and reporting on it. For acceptable expenditures, I think I have a slide on about that, but make sure you're not paying for something that's a whole lot like organizing. That's not acceptable. We have a slide, so I'll move on about that. But you do need to report back on what you spent the money on, and it does need to fit into the guidelines. If you have, oh, you went back. So, could you go back one, please, Marlon? Sorry. In NEA, also, if there's another affiliate program linkage, grant manager, something, we let your grant manager help you in that way. If you're working on something like Penny asked about who else is working on cultural competency, that's something the grant manager's here to help you with, to connect with people so you don't have to start from ground zero. And then you can play with your budget a little bit differently. If you're playing for development, you're not starting from ground zero. You'll start with 3 or 4 examples from other affiliates that you can adapt and extend. If at the end of your years, 1, 2, or 3, you wish to have an extension, you just work with your grant manager and report it back to we extend, hopefully not too much more than 6 months or a year, because you probably won't get another grant during that time. That's not a for sure, but you probably need to finish one thing before you move on to another. But there are things that happen that you get more partners, they pay for more different aspects, you can save some of the money you have and extend it beyond. So just work with your grant manager, and we're here to help you not to get in your way. Any questions about that so far with the budget? Okay. So here's what's restricted. There's indirect costs that some organizations charge frequently when they have a grant. That's not allowed in this because we know you already have operational budgets. Public relations activities, those grants are built into communications. It doesn't mean you can't ever do something around PR or print a flyer. That's expected, but it's not a PR campaign. That's the differentiation there. I want you to know you can print things, and we would want the logos on them, all those other types of things, but that's different than a PR campaign. So that's the distinction there. People sometimes think they can't do anything to promote, and that's not the case. We are not political. We are not about legislative programs. We are not capital improvements. Equipment, talk to your grant manager if something's needed. It depends upon how that's defined for you guys. It might be a little bit different, but we're not buying 15 computers for a classroom or for staff by any stretch of the imagination. It's really about programs. If something else is covered by other NEA grants or funded by the affiliate or other NEA monies, this should not take the place of that. Usually people don't get in trouble around grants, around the programs. They're more likely to get in trouble around something they charged to that wasn't supposed to be, that they're supplanting, not supplementing. This is hiring a full-time staff positions. Here's the difference. There are people who have grant managers. There's people I've recommended have grant managers. It's hard to add a whole bunch of work to something without having somebody do it. So we're a union. We don't want anybody to be left without a job at the end of 1, 2, or 3 years and not know it's coming, or to not have benefits. So that's the point of this, is to make sure that we are attentive to that situation and nobody comes in thinking they have a position and then they don't have one when the grant's gone, which is pretty familiar territory in the grants world. If you are an educator, if you have or are an educator on loan, if you're a member educator, and this happens a fair amount, who's doing part of their work at the affiliate office, make sure that you have an MOU, please, so it's clear, because rarely is a school calendar the same as the affiliate calendar. Rarely are the hours the same. Who do you report to? If there's a grievance process, who handles that? It's very important. Likewise, if you are an affiliate person who is all of a sudden sitting in a school district as part of the partnership on this grant or someplace else, again, the hours aren't the same. Sometimes your presence there makes the stronger program when you're sitting in a school district or school district office or someplace, or Department of Ed. But sometimes they get so they think that they control the grant or control your hours or the rest too, and you're not working your regular contract. So just a simple MOU saying this is what you're doing and who's doing what and who reports to who and what calendar they follow and what hours are. Just those things that might come into question. It's been interesting that some of the affiliates who negotiate contracts and negotiate the contract for members, then when they have members work in their affiliate office, there's not a congruency and it's caused a few problems. So simple, not legal, don't need to get two attorneys involved, but have an MOU, please, if that makes sense. Communications, on the side of the GPS, on Ed Communities on our site, we do have communications guidelines and the template plan there. We do send, when we get all of your materials in, we send out a media release to you that you can use or not. Some people get freaked out going, you're telling us what to say to the press. No, we're not. We just, out of courtesy, take some of your stuff and send it out to you, and you can decide what you want to do with it. We do hope you send something out, and then once you do, we hope you upload it and share with us on Ed Communities. We hope you also share anything that you put in that you shared with your state association, or university paper, or e-newsletter. Any of those types of things we hope you'll upload and share with both your progress report as well as Ed Community. We're really encouraging you to put the proper brand on for NEA, state and local logos. And it doesn't have to be the logo. You could just use the phrase instead. If you have 5 different entities that are supporting some aspect of the project, you can say this is a partnership with blah, 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 blah. Because you don't need to look like the back of a t-shirt for a marathon where there's 5 different logos and that's all dual link. So we're not looking to be ridiculous about it, but it's a little distressing to show up for something that the NEA GPS fund is paid for entirely, and there's no mention of it, nobody in the room knows it. So think about, with any grantee, to help with those types of acknowledgement as well. I mentioned sharing on Ed Communities. Betsy Johnson and Barbara Ransom are both helping with this, but we want you to share the resources you have, tell your stories and successes or pitfalls. When you do share resources and things, we'll ask that you tag it with hashtag NEA GPS Fund, and also some keywords, because the power, we don't have folders and those people don't search through folders anymore, use them the same way. They're working on it, but they, the search optimization of the Ed Communities is really powerful. So you want those keywords to be at the bottom so people know how to find things. And that's how, if you type in cultural competence and see what comes up, you could be really amazed, for instance, with Penny, to see what all exists within those programs. And that will be the power of some of what we've done, I believe. Again, copies of any promotional things that you've had. And we do understand that sometimes the story won't include something that you tried to push for because it's a local newspaper or fill in the blank. So they might not say exactly what you said. We understand that and aren't going to grouse at you. Just please share the celebrations that we can. And then we will also have webinars and conferences and other things that we hope you put in for once you get going. We hate to have people go present before they've had time to get the process going. So wait till you've had a little bit of success and gotten the things underway. And then we'll ask you to share on webinars, conferences, and all of that as well. Yeah. I'm sure that was an exclamation point. Sorry. So your GPS Fund grant manager, that was fun. Here's their role. I like to say I'm your thought partner. Do we have, oh, Barbara Ransom, you're on there, sorry. So Barbara Ransom, say a hi. Are you gone already? Oh, she might be gone. So Barbara Ransom is the one who will help you out with Ed Communities when you need things like help uploading a product or something to help you
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's an angry dog.
Yeah, that's something. I don't know. Yeah. So our role is really, the grant managers really think thought partner, a guide or a coach. We will try to help you link to content linkages in the building. So like who really works with recruitment of educators, who really works with mentoring and induction. So I like to say we're the weavers. We're the ones that help you tie to everybody you need to be tied to be successful. We need to know what you need and then continue to try to help you get those connections out in the field and here. We're also the ones who guide you through process. We are the ones who review your progress reports.
Okay, but right now?
And then we will request site visits, and that's an important thing too.
I'm online with my Annie.
That's an important thing to plan and have, and not let go too far. And then we're here also to help you know how to learn, network, and make a difference. Again, I've mentioned before that if you have changes, the goal is the thing. The big goal or big picture topic is really what needs to remain the same. Doesn't mean you can't ever change your approach because something's not working. Timelines, of course, things shift. Just keep us informed. If you change a goal, a specific one of your 1 to 5 goals, that should be big picture anyway. If you want to change some things under it or decide the measurement doesn't work, you need to adjust, that's okay. Then in the celebrations, we can't help promote if we don't know. Sometimes people will just contact one of us and say, who's really doing a good job about XYZ? We've had as many as 33 grants apiece, so you need to help keep us posted. Ed Communities is one way, but if you know something's coming up really big, let us know as well, because we can you should tap into your local and state communications, but also tap into NEA or have your local or state person doing that as well. We like to tell the story, so we want to get that going. If you face challenges, we are not expecting anything to go perfectly. Why would it? You know? That just doesn't happen in life much. So we are here to help provide guidance or listen or give suggestions or listen. You know, we don't always have the answers, but helping us understand what challenges you're facing. You know, there's all sorts of transitions of staff, transitions in school districts you might be working with, all sorts of upheavals, legislative challenges, any of the rest of it that just all of a sudden throw a wrench in everything. We get that. So you're trying to build a partnership based on success with us and others and assist in resources. Just count us to be on your team. Count on us to be on your team.
Sorry, it's starting to slip again. There we go.
So here are your 3 grant managers. As I mentioned, I'm Barbara Hopkins. My hair does not look like that today. I'm not on screen. Dr. Christopher E. Johnson. And then I don't believe he was able to join us today. And then Marlon Jeffers, who's here and you've seen a picture of, is our Center for Great Public Schools Teaching Fellow. Hooray. Out of Iowa/Nebraska. We like to claim them too. And with the GPS progress reports, it's every 6 months. So that's from when you get started, but plan on about 6 months from now. You will get an email reminder for whoever put their name in as the key contact. And probably if there's another liaison contact, we will do that as well. Again, we're trying to get to the point where we do goals and outcomes with the scope of work, where you'd say how you're doing. We will need a financial report for what was planned, what's the reality. Like to have what the partners have done in human and kind of financial resources too that help you. And part of this is about you learning to pay attention to those things because around the partners, because in most grants you would have to report those pretty diligently. And that helps you get the $5 million grants beyond what you're getting here. So We will want notes on thinking about how you're learning and growing, sharing any media or promotions that you have in the first 6 months. You may have shared them on GPS Network, but thank you, Karen. Take care. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a private message. Share the program materials that you have. If you've developed curriculum, we would really like you to share that. If only to say you have it or it's on your website and they can come to it. The grant money, part of it is to network and share and grow so we're not all reinventing the wheel. So upload that on Ed Communities, please. The progress report forms will be on Ed Communities now. When we get to the place where it's a reporting back of the scope of the work, we'll let you know how that changes if we get it, when we get it changed. One more.
There it goes.
So
You click once and it's moving twice. There you go. Okay, I'm going to do one.
too funny.
I don't know why it's doing that.
I don't either.
See if I click this way.
Okay,
There-
here.
there
I'm
it is.
really excited about this. So this is where our dear friend Betsy, who's on, and Barbara Ransom. Betsy's from Maryland.
Hi.
Betsy.
Hi.
Yay. Betsy's like the queen of webinars and engagement through Ed Communities and part of that GPS network, and Barbara Ransom was as well. And so Betsy's going to help us put together several things. We've got the NEA grants for Great Public Schools Ed Communities. And as I said, with our group called NEA Grants, the number 4 Great Public Schools, Barbara Ransom is just aces. If you hear from her, she's one of our team. She's an instructional coach in California who really helps guide us and puts things, takes care of the main side, all of the rest of that. So then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to start groups that are really around the core content of all the grants, which is building the Center for Teaching and Learning, which many of you have as a focus. So there will be an Ed Community group just on that for grant leaders and others who do similar work but don't have a grant. Partnerships will be another group. Diversifying funding is another one, because really what you're doing now by even having a grant is diversifying funding. We'll talk about other models for that too. And the equity, diversity, and cultural competence that many of you are engaged in, that will be a separate group where we focus a little more on content. And then educator recruitment, retention, our friend Marlon, who's on there today, will handle those. So those are the Ed community groups. If you look up at the next one going counterclockwise, case study is at the top. If it has a star, it's NEA staff are leading these. So we're doing a case study of about 8 locations that have diversified funds. So we can all learn from that, beyond just like GPS fund grants, to think, where can I go get the next big batch of funds to help support these fabulous efforts so we're not hamstrung by just member dues only. Then the webinars on content is where our friend Betsy comes in. And we will have about 15 webinars that are led by exemplary programs to share with others and be facilitated by a well-known author, Casey Reason. And we'll give you the whole schedule of those for now through the end of August. Then the other thing we'll have is online discussion on topics. So a topic might include something like trauma-based instruction. Trauma-informed instruction. I'm sorry, I know I got that word wrong. Trauma-informed instruction. We know we have 6 grants on that, but a lot of people are excited or engaged about that as a way to address the needs of students. So we make those available, and anybody who wanted to come can, but at least the 4 or 5 grantees dealing with a common topic will have a place and a way to connect in an ongoing basis, so they feel like they have a PLC, if that's not a bad word to you. If it is, make up another one. But, they'll have a network around that topic. So Betsy's helping us with both of those. Yay, Betsy. And then we hope you will reach out and go ahead and present at conferences for whatever groups you have a part of. Some of you are executive directors, your deputy execs. Some of you are part of NCUEA or the Turn Network or NSAII or any other alphabet, Learning Forward or ASCD. So please, as you evolve your project, please make sure and think about applying yourself. And you may use grant funds to do that within reason. We really don't want you out presenting 6 or 7 times over the next couple of years where you're using up a lot of grant funds that are supposed to be programs. So pay attention and get with your grant manager if it gets to be a significant amount. So, and then the grants report, we have a grant report right now that's coming out that was just given to the board of directors that was here. That's over the last 5 years to give you an overview, and you'll be a part of that down the line as part of the networking and learning that you can see as well, and you can see who else has done something similar to what has been done in the past. So that's kind of where we're going with all of your great work as you get started and what you can look forward to connecting as well. Any comments?
Let's get this party started.
There you go. I think it's going to be great. Okay. So Marlon.
And most of your work, like we said, is on at communities, on your grants for great public schools. And this is what it looks like. You're going to be uploading a picture of yourself in the members. We also have information where you can post resources, questions. Barbara Ransom, like we said, will be putting some information there, helps organize that. Those where all of your forms are from, and we look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Here is our community support.
Hey.
Yeah, okay, we have Betsy that is online with us, and then Barbara was at lunch and she has to go back to her classroom. But Betsy is going to be working with the webinars as well as the Ed Communities grants page. And Betsy, do you want to say a little something?
Well, I can't wait to get started with all my good people there at the Ed Communities. Special thanks to Barbara Hopkins, who's putting this all together. It's a lot of work, Barbara, but we can do it. And I'm looking forward to helping and assisting and supporting webinars, really good webinars, solid webinars that increase engagement, increase in enrollment in our community, and building a better community and a strong community. I think we have all the resources and all the people, the good people that I've met over the years that can do that. So I'm really looking forward to getting started and doing this.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you, Betsy.
Okay, let's move as slow as we go along here. I think we skipped. It's skipping 2 now.
You skipped
so.
one, yeah. Looks like you did.
Let me go back.
Who?
There it is. These are the who. The grants manager is David Boyd, and there's his email. The grant program specialists are listed there. You saw our pictures there, and our Ed Communities resources support is the Barbara and Betsy. And so all of our emails are there, and you can contact us anytime for any kinds of information. Also on the grants for great public schools, there's our website. You can go into that and not only join, but also join other content groups also for your resources. There we go.
So going back to this again, just going to remind you, so the MOU, all you have to do is sign it and send it in. So we'd like to get those done as soon as possible. You got your notice on the 1st on time by midnight. We thought you'd get them a little sooner, sorry. Had some things come up with some of the staff. So we're happy you got notified that day, yay, and that it was a positive. Hopefully all 3 of the documents, the letter that you sign under Andy's name, there's another thing that's, we call it the MOU, where you just send those back to David and your grant manager. It says who your grant manager is. Hopefully you've reviewed everything. You're on here, so I'm sure you have, or you wouldn't have otherwise. Please do sign up for Ed Communities and join that group. Go ahead and make a statement about what your work is, because everybody knows you have a grant by now. So say what you're planning on doing, that'd be fine. And you'll see the templates for the budget scope of work and communications plan and the communications guidelines over there. You'll also notice the NEA logo is over there if you need it on the left-hand side where Barbara's put all those key things you need. Then if you have not connected with your grant manager, do so. Hopefully they've reached out for you, but if something's missed somehow, please reach out so that you get in touch. You're on the webinar, so you got that one down. Thank you. I'm suggesting But by February 15th, you send in your draft of your addendum. If you need help with your goals and stuff, that's what your grant managers are for, so connect with them. I know several of my folks have connected with me already to take care of those, because writing your scope of work really depends upon what your goals or outcomes are. So connecting those two is important. So try to get everything done by February 15th. So if you have something to revise, you have time, because February 22nd is the cutoff for approval. Some of these have strung out over a couple of months in the past. It's too hard to get everything going with the numbers we have to not have people kind of start as a cohort together. So by February 22nd, we want all the items in and approved. And then and only then do you get your check. So that's kind of good motivation, huh? Talked about the media release coming as an example. So if you don't get that, get back with your grant manager. In the next couple of months, we'll work in, like I said, with Betsy and these groups. There's 5 people running those groups, that you will be connected around the work with other NEA staff and your grant manager and other people working on something similar, so that you can network on that. We hope you'll engage in that. We think that'll be real powerful. I know diversifying funding and partnerships, there's far more expert people on recruitment and retention of staff. So I want you to have the best people if you're my grantee. So I want you to connect with the other people working on it, as well as the people who study this and the content expert at NEA. So that's the point of getting those PLCs going, and Betsy helping to connect those folks online then. Once it's official, your progress reports comes every 6 months. Sharing your materials is there. By May 1st, it's 3 months out. Anything on section 2 or section B, I'm not sure if I lettered them or put numbers in, I apologize. But if you have another section that says within 3 months do this, then please be attentive and send those things too. We didn't want to overwhelm you and put it in the first month. So I wanted to give you some time, but don't just ignore that, please. And then September 1st will be the first progress report. And you can update the scope of work at that time if you need to. So say how you're doing on those things. If something needs to be changed, that's the time to change it for the next 6 months. By May 1st, at least, you should be discussing a site visit with your grant manager. There is a reason at times to have them come out to see something, but I rarely can see the process that you're going through or help you with more money or help you with barriers by sitting in workshops. So I myself don't want to just come and see some of the action, and which is a lot of workshops or a conference, because that doesn't help me meet with the executive director or commissioner of education or communications person or the rest, or deal with some problem areas, or help you think more strongly about what a sustainability plan is. So for me, that's kind of a balance. There's kind of 4 different site visits. At least I'm viewing it that way, and I think Marlon is too. Each grant manager deals a little bit differently. So we all know there's at least 4 different reasons for a site visit, and one is to see stuff, and get an overview. Another one's the communications. Another one's to be technical assistance. So if you need help with something, let us know, and we'll get you some technical assistance out there if we can in any way, shape, or form. And sometimes it's just to work early on about sustainability or partnership. If you need help with that, we've got some expertise. So let us know how we can help you. But get it on the books for a couple reasons. One is so we make sure to have the time. And another, at times the oversight committee likes to come out too. So they like plenty of advance notice so they can come and engage too. And so they have their stories to tell when they're making their rounds in the organization. And then again, February 1st and September 1st of each year, the progress reports are due. And I reminded you, which I've said before, but it bears repeating, if you need an extension at the end, you're not quite done and have some money left, then work with your grant manager to make sure to get permission, set a timeline, and get that done too.
Okay.
So,
Sorry, it keeps clicking twice. So
what questions do you have, or what are your immediate needs? Was this helpful to have this checklist? I don't know, and timelines, or speak to me.
Hi, Barbara Chafiza.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
this was extremely helpful, but I have a quick question. I have a phone conference with Marlon on the 16th,
Mhm.
and you guys suggested that we send a rough draft on the 15th. How?
I
Can we
think
send it on
16th
the
will be fine,
16th?
dear.
Or
16th. Yeah, that's fine. The point is you just need time before the 22nd. I don't want anybody waiting until the 22nd to send the original in and it's not done, you know?
No.
It's not approved. That's not a good position for any of us to be in. We've gotten our marching orders to have everything in by the 22nd. So
Yeah.
anything we do, so we make sure to have that in. So
Okay, thank you.
Cindy, great, thanks. I'm glad the checklist was helpful. Penny too.
So Barbara, I'll be meeting with you guys on Thursday of this coming week at 9 o'clock.
We have to change that. We'll be in touch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me know.
Okay, we will. So, any other questions or immediate needs? I'd be curious to know if you felt like this was helpful on top of the documents you got, or if it really was the same information too. I mean, we're not trying to overload anybody, but we wanted to make sure everybody had the opportunity to understand and ask any questions.
I think that the document that was mailed to us was overwhelming, and then by you going through it in detail is helping us understand everything, like
Right.
line by line.
Great, helpful.
And posting this up immediately on the site will be great too.
Yeah, good, thanks. Penny, thanks. Tom, thank you for that. Okay. So, all right.
This is Val Buffone with NEA Alaska, and yes, this was helpful. It's still feeling a little overwhelming, but we're really excited to get going. So the presentation is the only way to get it is on Ed Communities, or can you email it to us?
Ed Communities. And that's purposeful because we want to make
Right.
sure we're in that group and on it as well, because that's the way we give communication all of the time. If you need help with that,
Yeah,
we'll help you get on.
We're just having a follow-up meeting immediately following this, and
Okay.
it would be helpful to have it quickly.
Okay, we can do that.
So Barbara, then on the 15th, you need a scope. Is that what, I just want to recap for a minute.
Oh, they'll need, they have a list of what all they need. They need the scope of work. They need their goal. Well, each person has a separate list.
Right.
Addendum. Each person has a separate list because it's all very individualized into what they needed to do next.
And that has been mailed to us.
That's been mailed to them.
To who?
Each grantee has their own.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, each grantee has their own because it's not all the same.
All right.
So, anything else in the final analysis, people? Our dear friends, our grantees. I don't know if we have one more page. Hopefully you understand what's next. You get what the addendum sections are and what tools you have. Grant reports, the progress report timelines, don't worry about those now. They're 6 months down the line. But think about it as far as scope of work. You know what the grant manager role is. Nobody's going to come in and try to take your money away from you. We're here to help you, so don't see us as regulators, in that way. Of course, there's always respect needs to be shown to the grant manager because it's your lifeline to the resources, but our role is really to be your partner in this. This is NEA, your organization, and we're in this together. Ed Communities is a key learning tool. Remember, you're here to promote as well, develop things, of course, and then promote them and help with the networking and learning. And we're always here to answer any questions. And Val, we will get this to you right away.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else, folks?
Nope.
We're so grateful that you joined us, and looking forward to working with you throughout the next 1 to 3 years, depending upon your grant. So, and Betsy and Barbara and Marlon as colleagues, and Christopher, who I don't think was able to join us today. So thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. Contact me,
Yeah, I'm
Barbara.
here, Barbara.
Will do.
Bye-bye. Thank you.